Bonjour, je vais m'exprimer en français.
Good day. I will speak in French today. I will complicate the work of the translators because many things which I projected to say have been mentioned already, notably by Mrs. LaRouche. So I will make cuts in my text, which I gave to the translators. To start, as a preamble, I would like to congratulate the Schiller Institute for organizing this conference at a critical juncture, when the threat of a nuclear war, which would lead to the extinction of humanity, becomes clearer by the day because of the concentration in the heart of Europe of weapons capable of destroying the planet within seconds. To respond to the reinforcements of US strategic forces in NATO on European territory, Russia has had to deploy an equivalent arsenal of deterrence on its western borders. It is high time that the strategists of various countries, even those far from the European theater, demand restraint and more wisdom from the heads of state of the entire world. That is the purpose of this beneficial initiative by Mrs. Helga Zepp-LaRouche, whom I wish to compliment personally. We just learned yesterday the results of the British referendum on the Brexit. The British people decided to leave the European Union. This decision is historic and of global importance. It will have consequences on the future of Europe, and not only on the future of the European Union. With the British decision, the EU is dead. Since the French presidential election next March will be directly affected by it, as well as the US election. And Donald Trump, as we saw, already commented favorably on the British decision. Finally, inside Europe itself, the vote will have enormous consequences. Because other countries, other peoples of Europe will be tempted to impose the same decision on their leaders that the British people forced on theirs. Already now, the men and women of that European Union are consulting with one another on the way to fill the gaps. But more intelligent people know that cannot be filled. There exists a direct consequence is the fact that the Atlantic treaties, about which Ambassador Freedom spoke before, these treaties fell into the Atlantic and fell to the bottom of it. And it also manifests the emergence of popular wills of European people, which will be revolting, following the British example, against the technocratic machines and anti-democratic machines which were governing through the European Union their destiny. I will now come to my remarks on the dangers of nuclear war in Europe. I have reread the texts of Heraclitus, and although they go back to the 6th century before our era, I find there is a surprising analogy between what Heraclitus thought of humanity at that time. Nietzsche cites him by saying, he believes in an end of the world periodically repeating itself, and in an ever-renewed emerging of another world out of the all-destroying world fire. after having destroyed everything. The period during which the world hastens towards that world fire and the dissolution into pure fire is characterized, it's Nietzsche talking about Heraclitus, is characterized by him most strikingly as a demand and a need. The state of being completely swallowed up by the fire as satiety. And then he adds, satiety gives birth to a crime, hubris. That is, the overabundance of means, excess, the unmeasurable pride that define hubris are crimes against humanity, a humanity that needs caution and measure.
Je raccourcis mon propos.
Our world is one which has seen the accumulation of gigantic means of destruction since the appearance of the nuclear weapon in our arsenals, a fatal weapon which, as General de Gaulle said, is not a mere progress in weapons techniques, but a technological leap upsetting the traditional rules of warfare as, for the first time in the history of mankind, man invented a weapon which cannot be used. Exclusively a deterrent weapon, and thus the assurance for any power that has it that no hostile power could take the risk of being destroyed at the same time it would attack. But impossible to use reasonably, hence the title Weapon of Non-Use.
Le grand anthropologue et philosophe français,
the recently deceased great French anthropologist and philosopher René Girard, who died 3 years ago, who invented the mimetic theory, who wrote about prehistoric civilizations up to historic civilizations, wrote in The Unknown Voice of the Real, in reference to Nietzsche, quote, true vengeance, in the sense of the Nietzschean resentment, is again with us in the form of the absolute nuclear weapon, which reduces our planet to the size of a primitive village, once again terrified by the prospect of a war to the death. True vengeance is so terrifying that its staunchest supporters dare not release it, since they know full well that all the atrocities they have inflicted on their enemy can also be inflicted on them by those enemies. René Girard was not a strategist, but I find this to be an excellent definition of nuclear deterrence. I wonder what doctrine Heraclitus would have formulated had he known the potential for mankind to unleash nuclear fusion, the H-bomb, which he already then spoke of, a world fire. One great strategist, General Pierre-Marie Gallois, who honored me by introducing me into his think tank, told me his exchanges with General de Gaulle on the nuclear weapon, and how so few people, even among specialists, had understood the new concept. They continued to think in terms of military coercion, whereas it was all about deterring someone from attacking us. I quote him, Gallois, quote, suddenly plunged into the atomic era, opinion continued to reason that it could have rationally continued to do in the classical cycle. They thought in terms of coercion when deterrence was at stake. They compared the forces available numerically when they should have assessed the damages that the strongest would suffer, no matter how powerful, if it attacked the existence of the weakest. I will come back to the notion of deterrence that American strategists are trying to destroy by saturating the world with their nuclear weapons, or at least saturating Europe. Right now, NATO is engaged in an unheard of classical and nuclear military build-up in Europe, in particular on Russia's borders in Poland and the Baltic states, on top of the forces already stationed in Romania, Italy, Germany, and Poland. I will not go into the details of the forces deployed, which have already been mentioned, but the Aegis system is a global system which covers the entire planet and aims at ensuring American total military supremacy and nuclear saturation, which I just mentioned. I skip a full description. I want to remind people here that the entire U.S. military system, with its incomparable budget of more than $700 billion per year, when all the funds of defense and intelligence organizations are combined, is now directed against China and Russia because of their alleged hegemonic ambitions in Europe for one, in Asia for the other, thereby reversing the roles. This strategy draws in its allies, especially the EU, on which France is a thorough, but that could change, although it seems doomed to implosion, which I said in my preamble, with the help of our British friends. As I said, China, through its laborious and industrious efforts, has made tremendous economic progress, eradicating famine and underdevelopment for a majority of the population. It has accumulated significant financial reserves while maintaining the centralism of collectivist communism, which gives it the great advantage of maintaining central control over opening its immense population to world trade, as well as control over the major adaptation reforms. The opposite happened in the Soviet Union, which quickly dissolved under the perestroika of a Gorbachev who had good intentions but lost control of the reform process. China is considered by the United States as a rival to be destroyed before it gets too powerful. Therefore, it is denied the right to defend its vital interests, in particular in the surrounding seas, by creating hostile alliances of those countries that value U.S. protection. But the fact of the matter is that the fine-tuned Chinese diplomacy has convinced a growing number of countries in the region that China is not an imperial power and rather wishes to favor international cooperation to develop economic projects that are profitable for all. Speaking to the translators, I will not go into those projects which have already been described by Ambassador Freeman and by Mrs. LaRouche. US diplomacy presents Russia as an imperial power ready to invade Europe. But that is such a blatant falsehood that one wonders how European countries can accept the idea unless they have some reason to link up with the United States to avoid having to spend more on their own defense. This falsehood seems to have recently lost ground in Brussels, where, under the pressure of different peoples and countries, it is recognized that the sanctions are more harmful for the EU member states than for Russia itself, which has developed options in Asia and on its own immense territory. In France, on June 8, the French Senate, following the National Assembly, voted up a proposal to gradually lift the sanctions, and the President of the EU, Mr. Juncker, attended the Petersburg Economic Forum as he could no longer resist the pressure coming from deep within the real Europe, which has no problem understanding the entente and cooperation with the immense country of Russia is required for its future. This, of course, is worrisome for Washington, which had viewed Western Europe as a protective glacis against Soviet Russia since 1945, as said before. After its victory over Soviet communism in 1989 and the dissolution of the USSR, a certain hubris or overconfidence inspired America to destroy the new Russia by buying up the politicians and oligarchs and supporting Chechen terrorism in various ways. Putin, an astute strategist who understands the workings of the balance of power, wished to put an end to his country's disintegration and come to an understanding with the number one power in the world, accepting the concessions imposed by its weakness, but less and less inclined to sacrifice the vital interests of Russia when they were threatened by the US imperial hysteria, which presented the one attacked as the attacker. Frankly speaking, what serious strategist could imagine that Russian divisions would invade Eastern Europe to reconquer the former satellites of the Soviet Union? What for? To what purpose? To grab their mining or industrial wealth, or to convert them to the Orthodox faith? All experts know that the purpose of stopping the coup in August 2008 in Georgia was to clearly demonstrate what the limits were of NATO's constant expansion eastward, in violation of promises made after the US State Department-led provocations by the Tbilisi government. In Crimea, everybody knows it was the result of a coup d'etat, and the American strategist George Friedman even officially declared it to be a coup d'etat organized by the United States to overturn the government in power in Kiev. Putin's re-emerging Russia attempted for a long time to come to an agreement with the United States and its European neighbors, but the hegemonic intentions of part of the oligarchy in Washington could not accept that the world could be multipolar and that America could share the running of the planet with new powers. Apparently, the candidate Donald Trump hopes to break this short-sighted system. I know this will not please everybody, but I have analyzed his speeches and I hope he managed to break this system for the sake of the world and of the Americans, since he proposes to put an end to military interventionism, to cooperate with Russia and to talk to China in order to focus on the development of the national economy by bringing back the pension funds that have gone abroad for more profit and to invest them in the U.S. economy to create jobs. That is why he is caricatured in Western media as a charlatan, but we know that the Western media belong to international finance. So I think that it's good to know when the Western media defend a certain point of view, you can be sure that's the viewpoint of finance. Putin is presented in the same way by the same media. It is international finance doing its propaganda. I recall a man of common sense who was Chuck Hagel, former U.S. Defense Secretary, who recently stated that the NATO's buildup near Russia was a mistake and counterproductive. That is why I spoke of the hubris or hysteria of the United States, because it does not seem to realize that this military escalation against Russia raises extreme fear in the entire world, because it involves nuclear weapons. It is obvious that Russia will not accept to be crushed without attacking at the same level. That would not mean World War III, but the end of humanity. That is why the U.S. strategic concept put forth by certain experts, which consists of saturating Europe with nuclear weapons to force the Russians to launch a first strike on the continent, which would automatically destroy Russia in retaliatory strikes, is an aberration and probably just a pure propaganda to give the impression of U.S. nuclear supremacy, but which makes short shrift of the European continent and shows the lack of respect for its European allies. Under this concept, if Europe launches the first strike against Europe, which would destroy Europe, the United States would then trigger their strike against Russia, but the US would not be hit. It should be clearly understood that it's only propaganda and that things would not really work that way. It is time for the most important power of the world, at least militarily, in terms of the arsenals and the number of bases around the world, to become measured and to cease refusing to see the world that is changing, the balances that are shifting, the emergent powers that are asserting themselves. It is time for that power to decide to enter into cooperation to the benefit of all, with the most powerful assisting the poorest and scientific progress serving all of humanity. The drama of our time is that the excessiveness and blindness of the United States are the result of a messianic conception which brought to power politicians who are convinced, ever since the collapse of the communism in the USSR, that since the supreme good, liberalism, defeated the absolute evil, totalitarian collectivism, the United States is entrusted with the divine mission of leading the world. In addition, there are the interests of the financial powers organized in lobbies at Washington, whose assets cover a large part of the planet and who own the media and their means of propaganda. These networks are the actual decision makers of US policy, so much that the government of the US is often unable to apply its own decisions if they do not comply with those interests. In that respect, the Obama administration did manage to impose a few reforms, such as medical insurance domestically or the nuclear deal with Iran, but they are still there. Nearing the end of his term, the US president appears to have given in to their demands, in particular in Syria, where, despite the announcements of agreements with Russia to end the bloodbath, the actions on the ground continue to fuel the fighting. Taken off guard by the Russian military intervention in September 2015, which forced the players to take off their masks and choose between fighting terrorism or not, the US leaders continued the policy of regime change against any government that does not accept their policy, which greatly benefits an Israel which uses the chance to deny more rights of Palestinians and take their territory in total violation of UN rules. I will now move on the new Warsaw Pact, which is being set up. NATO will be holding a summit in Warsaw in early July, following on the major Anaconda maneuvers under US aegis with the participation of 24 countries, including Macedonia and Albania. And of course, the Baltic countries and Turkey, Canada, Finland, but fortunately without France. This is symbolic since the Warsaw Pact ceased to exist after the dissolution of the USSR and what we hoped was the end of the Cold War. Such a summit in such a place sounds like a useless and dangerous challenge, especially given the reinforcements of NATO's nuclear weapons in Europe. That is why, as a French patriot, I would like France to withdraw from NATO and to refuse to take part in the Warsaw Summit, the purpose of which is to provoke Russia. I am described on various websites, in articles, and in books as being pro-Russian or pro-Chinese or pro-Iranian or rabidly anti-American. In fact, I am simply pro-French and convinced that my country's interest is to see the world as it is, to shake off any bloc ideology, and to respect the sovereignty of states. I would like to France to recover its own sovereignty and to resume the independent policy which was her tradition since General de Gaulle, which does not rule out agreements with our neighbors, of course. Our era is experiencing the return of national sentiment in Europe as the impression sets in that to avoid disappearing into shapeless hodgepodge, the various peoples need to defend their heritage and enrich it through exchanges with the others. A Europe of the nations is called upon to replace the technocratic EU, which is unable to meet the great challenges of our times. Its sincere acolytes are beginning to understand that it's enough to jump up and down on one shell like a goat bleating, Europe, 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 to build it. And that doesn't help at all. In conclusion, I would say that it's high time for the American hubris to be replaced by a spirit of cooperation, which the entire world would greet with relief. A cooperation among all countries on the basis of mutual respect and shared interest. In such an appeased climate among nations, gradual but total nuclear disarmament should be on the agenda, and the nuclear powers should agree to proceed with it simultaneously. France, which has proved its greatness in the past in defending universal values, could contribute to this process when the other nations concerned have renounced their threats. But nuclear deterrence, which has so far prevented a new deadly world war, will have to continue to be exercised in one way or another to guarantee planetary peace. To conclude, I will quote a great French philosopher who was also an extraordinary statesman, General de Gaulle, in the 1964 address to students of the Mexico University, who said the following, which I find exceptional.
C'est ma conclusion.
Quote, indeed, beyond the distances which are shrinking, beyond the ideologies that are weakening, and the political systems that are losing their breath, and unless humanity destroys itself someday in a monstrous self-destruction, the fact that will dominate the future is the unity of our universe. One cause, that of mankind, one necessity, that of world progress, and consequently of assistance to all those countries that desire it in order to develop. One duty, that of peace. These constitute for our species the very basis of its existence. As you can see, this humanist vision is consistent with the recommendation of Saint Matthew to first seek the kingdom of God and its justice. Thank you.